Shit has just hit the fan as it appears the early stages of a legitimate financial crisis equal to or possibly greater than the '08 crisis may be at our doorstep. As of now, SVB, First National Bank, Signature Bank, JPMorgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and Citigroup all implicated. Buckle up, guys. It could be the start of a major banking collapse. Let's get to it. We'll get it started with an article from Bloomberg. Silicon Valley Bank collapses and enters FDIC receivership. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed into Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation receivership on Friday after its long-established customer base of tech startups grew worried and yanked deposits, so they had a run on the bank. The California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, in a statement Friday, said it has taken possession of Silicon Valley Bank insolvency. It is getting spicy out there, guys. Worse is yet to come. There may be some kind of crack in the financial system. The implosion of California lenders Silicon Valley Bank and Silvergate has investors worried. They're concerned a particular weakness in the banks is mirrored across the financial system. One investor called it the first sign there may be some kind of crack in the system. Things are getting wild. Bill Smead, the chairman of Smead Capital Management, a $5.5 billion asset manager, told Wall Street Journal people are waking up to the gravity that this is one of the biggest financial euphoria episodes. These same low-income homeowners defaulted on their mortgages in huge numbers. This drastically devalued the mortgage-backed securities that had been built upon them, meaning that all of a sudden banks were sitting on catastrophic losses. Chaos ensued, and there are parallels with this situation facing banks today. This time, the concern for banks isn't risky mortgage-backed securities, but the bonds they bought in the wake of the financial crisis. Oh yeah, buy those bonds. There's no risk with those. Isn't that connected to one of the biggest shitcoins on the planet? This time, the concern for banks isn't risky mortgage-backed securities, but the bonds they bought in the wake of the financial crisis. Interest rates have shot up from their post-crisis lows, meaning lower interest bonds bought before 2022 are worth less than they paid for them. See how this happens? See how this is going to scaffold and trickle up? Indeed, on Monday, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation said U.S. lenders were sitting on about $620 billion of unrealized losses in securities such as low-interest bonds. Oh, nothing to worry about here. That should be fine. All right, and here we go. Vigilant Fox shared a clip from last night's Tucker Carlson, and they were getting into the weeds on this, so let's see what they had to say.
We're not Ukraine, so obviously the Biden administration isn't paying super close attention to the American economy, but we try to keep track, sort of, and we noticed there was a major stock sell-off today after the tech-focused bank SVB Financial announced a large stock sale. Almost looked like a bank run. The Silicon Valley Bank stock plunged by 60%. And so we wanted to talk to Charlie Gasparino of Fox Business, the senior correspondent, to know if this should be of some concern. Charlie, thanks a lot for coming on.
Definitely, it is some concern. Yeah, I mean, I will say this. There's two stories here. There's the obviously the local story about a Silicon Valley bank that needed capital, that was facing tremendous withdrawals from Silicon Valley company and had to sell its portfolio of treasury securities, which are depressed in value right now because of the Fed rate increases. That's the one story, the micro story. The canary in the coal mine story is out there as well, which caused a 500-point decline in the Dow today. And that's that banks in general are holding on treasury securities that they essentially accumulated during all the Fed pumping of interest rates and all the crazy spending by the Biden administration. They hold these things, and now, since you have Fed rate increases, those are worth a lot less. So the balance sheet of JPMorgan, of Bank of America, and you go down the line of all the banks that sold off today, they have impaired balance sheets. Now, does this mean we're going to have a banking crisis tomorrow? I don't think so. These are treasuries. They're not, crazy mortgage-backed securities as we had in 2008. What it does show you is that the economy is really structurally screwed up. You cannot print and spend as much money as we have and not have wild dislocations in the economy, including on bank balance sheets, including bad stuff that's going down. And we should point out this is a Silicon Valley lender. Usually the tech sector is supposed to be this great, prosperous place. It's getting crushed right now. Again, a canary in the coal mine. Banks are exposed to this as well in New York, the big money center banks. So you could see how this thing could get out of hand. And again, the president can get up there and keep saying how great things are. There are real underlying problems in this economy. And, we're starting to see it play out little by little with episodes like this.
Headline, the laws of nature still apply.
Right. Charlie, you can't print something and make it not a commodity that's losing its value, and that's what we did with the U.S. dollar.
Remember Tucker's orange pill? He's about that sound.
Charlie Gasparino, thank you so much for that update.
All right, here we go. Let's get to Dr. Jeff. And yeah, he seemed to hit on this point that this might be the domino. This might be where shit really starts unfolding, unraveling, and getting real. I don't know. I was just graduating high school, but the past few days, I like Dr. Jeff, have had those '08 vibes for sure. Let's just get into it and listen to what Dr. Jeff has to say. Like I said, not the most optimistic, but I think he's kind of hitting the nail on the head here. I think he sees where this could go.
Takeaways right now. It's been kind of a crazy week in the markets.
Hey, Sam. Good morning. Hey, everybody. This has been a great conversation. Preston, I loved your take on it. And I actually agree with basically everything you said.
Preston made a good point before on how all of this is a result of poor policy and policy errors that led to all of these egregious actions, and why you can't have a centralized system controlling the monetary supply and all the bad temptations and different things that go in there. You have to disintermediate it. But here we go.
Just to go back to that, I think that Operation Choke Point is in full effect right now. They set the stage, and the government is clearly, and the regulators are clearly picking losers, and there's more to come. So anyways, these are very interesting times. So fast forwarding, Sam, to your question, I'm having a hard time being optimistic, right? I'm a natural optimist. I was excited about things like liquidity bottoming in October and then ramping up all the way through kind of towards the end of January. Man, everything has basically changed since then. Like we've talked about before, the narrative has flipped back to inflation being higher and sticky high, and then the Fed
January
raising rates and raising them higher and keeping them higher for longer. That's obviously negative for risk assets, and especially rate sensitive assets, which include most risk assets, kind of across the board. I will tell you that, I keep waiting for something to change to the positive side. I keep waiting for inflation to come down. I keep waiting for net liquidity to start increasing again, but we just got new numbers in yesterday afternoon. These get updated. So we got updated bank reserves, which are still holding just barely above 3 trillion, which I think is intentional. And I think that net liquidity also is basically just kind of holding steady, but it's in this clear long-term downtrend. And that has just only accelerated since the end of January. I don't think the regulators are on the sides of the markets. I don't think interest rates are on the sides of the market. I think, and Joe was on a space with me yesterday, we were talking about this. To me, it looks like that because of the fear of contagion, that this may be kind of the larger domino now that is going to start this contagion effect, possibly. So possibly this will get contained, but you have to take in consideration, especially to Preston's point, the stage has been set, right? Interest rates are very high. The system is extremely fragile right now. The banking system, which we were told is extremely strong all along, we're starting to see how fragile it is. I think we're watching credit default swaps increase across the board, both on treasuries, which is still very low, mind you, but they are increasing.
Look at the
and they're rising precipitously in the banking sector. That's worrisome. There are lots of worrisome things. I tweeted out yesterday that I'm having 2008 vibes right now. You're starting 100%. To watch the dominoes fall. They start with little dominoes. We all know that meme where it's this one small domino and the dominoes get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the system goes down. There's a possibility that we're at that moment right now. So I'm watching things extremely closely. All of the equities markets, from NASDAQ, S&P, small caps, they're all right around the range of their 200-day moving average. They had popped Bitcoin decisively too. Above them for a couple months, but now it looks like they may be headed back lower. Bitcoin is just barely hanging out above its 200-day moving average. We'll see what happens. I will say that Bitcoin, for its part, is looking pretty oversold at the moment on from a technical standpoint. But it's hard for Bitcoin to not get sucked down with all of this nonsense, 100%. Right? Crypto, it's still, unfortunately, it's still linked to crypto in the minds of just everybody, basically everybody except the people here on stage and in this room. And so except when crypto things go down, like Silvergate, whatever, Do Kwon and like Sam Bankman-Fried, all these guys, that pulls Bitcoin down with it. So we're having another one of those moments right now. So long story short, having a hard time being optimistic unless something changes. And I think the one thing that could possibly save us, the one glimmer of hope, is we have CPI coming out on Tuesday. If that surprises significantly to the downside, that could restore some hope. If that does not surprise significantly to the downside, I'm nervous that we're at a floor dropout moment and that things are really going to start getting bad, especially over the weekend. I just saw one more headline and then I'll stop talking. That the Treasury, Janet Yellen, they're keeping their eye on several banks now. So I think right now, behind the scenes, the regulators, the powers that be, are scrambling as far as what do we do about this situation? How do we stem this from turning into a serious contagion risk? And if that gets out and gets leaked out to the public, I think things could get really bad in a hurry.
Man, it is getting wild out there, guys. Let's go through it. We got tons of tweets and some things, some history. Man, what a day. What a day. Now, here we have Hassan Shabir, and he goes through this list of various financial crisis, bank runs, and different things throughout time. So 1637, you got the Dutch tulip mania, U.S. land speculation bubble, the first Great Depression, 1819, U.S. commercial paper crisis, first global economic crisis. Yeah, there we go. So Panic of 1837. That was the one I was thinking of. And again, that one is where we get into those 90-year cycles. That's where it begins. 1837 and 1929 lining up pretty good. First global economic crisis, U.S. Marine National Bank panic, first U.S. stock market crash, 1907, the Knickerbocker Panic, crash and Great Depression of 1929, the Roosevelt downturn, Bretton Woods, what else we have here? The Nixon shock global crash, Black Monday, recession, the Asian crisis, the '08 financial crisis we know about. And here we go. Corey just put this out today. This chart explains what's broken with banks, in particular, smaller ones, and we're getting back into this bond issue with one of the scary charts going around showing that the large extent of unrealized losses in bonds sitting in books classified as held to maturity at U.S. banks at the end of 2022. What does this mean? Well, let's check it out. Banks enjoy a very favorable accounting regime, and this is how it works. So after the global financial crisis, commercial banks were asked to keep a liquidity coverage ratio above 100%. This means they always have enough high-quality liquidity assets to meet deposit outflows in a stress scenario. This effectively means that banks around the world are forced to keep around 10 to 15% of the asset side of their balance sheet invested in HQLA. That's big, and guess what qualifies for HQLA? Reserves at the Fed, and you guessed it, bonds. Ugh, throw those bonds in the fucking trash. Effectively, banks were asked to own a large amount of liquid assets and were told bonds were the only game in town due to regulation. What bonds? Mostly government bonds, but be aware, also corporate bonds and mortgage-backed securities can qualify. We know how that ended. When regulators force you to own tons of bonds, they also force you to swallow a lot of P&L volatility, and banks don't like that. That's why regulators allow bank treasuries to park bonds in two accounting-friendly books available for sale and held to maturity. In both cases, treasuries or corporate MBS bonds lose value. The bank's P&L, profit and loss, does not record the loss immediately. The unrealized gains and losses of securities held in AFS hits the capital position of the banks, not its P&L. But the true banger is that bonds booked in held to maturity books are reported at amortized cost, or in other words, the unrealized losses basically do not show up in banks' financial statements. This creates an incentive scheme to park as many bonds in these accounting categories as you can earn coupons over time and don't face P&L volatility. The flip side is when you need liquidity, banks can only sell a small portion of HTM bonds before being tainted as non-compliant from regulators. The large extent of HTM hidden losses is worrisome. And we continue. Well, you are drying the system up slowly but surely. The thing is, reserves are not going down in equal fashion for large banks and small banks. Small banks are seeing reserves shrink much faster. They have less readily available liquidity. Now, also consider that the funding landscape is getting more competitive. U.S. households can earn 5% plus risk-free interest rate with less risk by buying T-bills rather than depositing money at banks. One could argue small banks are even more exposed to this dynamic. In other words, small banks face a double whammy: less liquidity, reserves in the system, disproportionately affecting them. A tougher funding landscape with plenty of safer and higher yielding alternatives for depositors. This is the real issue. And let's continue, guys. So here we go from Inside Paper. Just in, bank panic. First Republic Bank shares crash a record 37% right at the open today. It is getting gnarly. And this goes back to what Preston Pish was saying on this series of policy errors that have created this entire disaster. Print money to fund COVID social programs and wars leads to massive inflation and forces them to raise rates, which haven't even really tamed inflation. As we were listening to Dr. Jeff, we know it came in hot in January, and just the feeling I have is we're going to see, we had a 0.5 uptick, I think something similar in February, probably leading to more downside. But halted, short, restricted, halted. Regional banks are a clusterfuck this morning, and we can look at all these banks halting withdrawals and different things going on. This bank crisis is 100% the result of terrible policy at the very top, supervised by both parties across multiple administrations. And Preston Pish was hitting on this morning, too. He said this goes back 6 administrations as far as this poor monetary policy, a plague on both your houses. Incidentally, this is why you can't print money forever. Your economy eventually starts to break. We could be right in the middle of it right now. Russia and China are looking at this banking crisis and salivating. All they need to do is keep us printing money, and they'll win without firing a shot. Better call Satoshi. And here we go, Bloomberg markets. And when these things happens, it becomes an international issue, okay? With how intertwined everything is, German financial regulator BaFin says it's examining the fallout of Silicon Valley Bank and its oversight of the bank's branch in the country. German bank regulator and others all over. We know the Treasury is eyeing this situation closely to see how much contagion there is, how devastating it could be. And here from Going Parabolic, SVB, First Republic Bank, Signature Bank, JPMorgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, it is getting out of hand. Is a banking crisis beginning to hit? Japanese banks down 5%, Bank of America down 6.2%, Barclays down 6.2%, JPMorgan down 5.4%, Wells Fargo down 6.13%, and interesting things at Wells Fargo, to say the least, the past couple of days. We'll get to that. Here we go from Bitcoin Magazine. California regulators closed Silicon Valley Bank in the largest bank failure since the Great Recession. History is rhyming hardcore right now, and Silicon Valley Banks makes it the largest bank failure in U.S. history and the largest bank failure since '08. We better buckle up, guys, because we are just dipping our toes into what this could possibly be. The FDIC to the 93% of Silicon Valley Bank's deposits that are uninsured. All insured depositors will have full access to their insured deposits by Monday morning. Interesting, this stuff happens on the weekend too, right? So the big dogs can get everything settled over the weekend, and retail gets their teeth kicked in come Monday or Tuesday. I don't know. That's just the feeling I get right now. Yeah, here we go. Wells Fargo has me like this at 9 a.m. on payday. I will definitely be closing my accounts. Some people went to check their accounts. They were empty and even had negative balances. So this is getting super crazy and weird. This is the main reason, and that's not the only bank. Wells Fargo is doing damage control because of the future banking system collapse. Your money will not come back, but if it does, you should go to an ATM and get cash immediately. Okay, so let's dig in some more. Wells Fargo. Okay, guys. Now, like I was saying, Wells Fargo customers are reporting their direct deposits and scheduled paychecks were missing from their online accounts this morning, just to add to the unease, the fear, and uncertainty. And when markets aren't certain and crazy things happen, there may be a run on the banks that we've seen, maybe full-on collapse of some of these smaller banks. Silicon Valley Bank down 60%, halted for news, failed to fundraise. First Republic down 30%, halted for volatility. Signature Bank down 20%. Oh boy. And Mr. Powell is probably getting ready to get that money printer fired up again and possibly prevent an '08 catastrophe. Now, here we go. One of the best analysts in the game, Lynn Alden, kind of like tries to level everybody out here. I'm going to interrupt today's scheduled doom and gloom and say most banks will be fine. The ones facing problems have an industry-specific and thus volatile deposit base, or an unusually high ratio of securities on their book for deposit safety, big and diversified banks. At the heart, it's a duration problem rather than a solvency problem. The bank's deposit base as a whole can't really go anywhere, so the widespread unrealized losses won't be marked to market, but deposits can move around. So for weak areas, that's exactly what's happening. Thank you, Lynn, for delivering that signal. And I just got this one from that dirty bubble. Circle held undisclosed sum at Silicon Valley Bank as of last attestation. 11.4 billion reserves were in cash. Ooh, getting spicy. Man, if you haven't yet, make sure you get your Bitcoin off of exchanges. Take your Bitcoin into self-custody. Don't be reliant on these people. Like, banks are counterparty risk. Why wouldn't I be my own bank? I have no counterparty risk with Bitcoin. Never been hacked in 14 years. The greatest performing asset in history. Why fuck around with all these things? Like, just based on math, the fiat system is going to go to zero. And when it does happen, you better hope you have some Bitcoin on hand. And if not, if I were you, I'd call Satoshi right away. Guys, it is getting gnarly out there. We could be on the cusp of something massive, wild, and the biggest financial crisis of our lifetime so far. And really the first one that Bitcoin has really lived through. and really been challenged with. Man, if you guys want to learn more about what was going on with Silvergate and the rest, check out these videos. We got more coming. Keep tuning in for The Signal at Simply Bitcoin, and we'll keep serving it up, baby. Until next time, peace.